Welcome back, everyone. In the last video, I talked about gameplay cadence and the moment-to-moment pacing that I was experiencing while playing Path of Exile. Thinking on it more over the past week, I've now realized that league choice changed that cadence for me in a major way as well. Trade league, solo self-found, private leagues all changed what I paid attention to while playing, the progression that I felt for my character, how much friction I experienced gearing my characters, and honestly, just how long I stayed interested in the game. After reading through all the comments and discussion on the previous video, I figured I'd just sit down and share some of my experiences with that journey. Because I think a lot of us are trying to figure out how we actually enjoy engaging with Path of Exile and other games, plus hobbies that we choose to spend our time on. So my experience of initial gameplay and enjoyment with Path of Exile was in Trade League. Back, I think, around Anarchy or Ambush was when I first started playing. I hopped in, looked around. Back then there was 3 acts and 3 difficulties for the game. I was heavily drawn in by the passive tree, looking very, very similar to the sphere grid from Final Fantasy X, a game which I really adore. But ultimately, the systems that existed and my own kind of approach to the game, it just made it hard for me to get onboarded and understand what was going on, so I stopped playing. When I came back a second time, I believe around when Act 4 was introduced and Malachi was also introduced, I got a bit further on my next go-through of the campaign. I think I made it to the end of Cruel difficulty and early Merciless difficulty. It was a lot of fun, much more enjoyable, but I didn't make it any further into Merciless because the repetition of the acts was something that was not really vibing with me. But I could start to see how the other systems in the game were growing more interesting to me. When I returned the third time, that's when I believe the game really started to click for me. And that is also when I decided to go to YouTube and have a look at some build guides. I was curious to see what more experienced players were up to. And probably very similar to a lot of new players, you very likely stumbled upon Mathil, as did I, and I was drawn in by his passion for experimentation. So I tried out a few of his builds in trade to varying degrees of success. But the build guide that I ultimately had the most success with and that allowed me to get further into the end game and into the mapping system was LiftNerdBro's Frostbolt Totem build. And it was a really fun time. And since I was in trade, any time that I struggled with any particular aspect of the build, like if I was missing some key unique items or I needed life or resistances, there were plenty of items listed at reasonable prices, especially for somebody who was starting out really new to the league. I don't believe the Frostbolt build was meta at the time, so that definitely helped keep the currency requirement of gear to be much less extreme and quite accessible for me. I used that build several times to explore other aspects of the game as they were released with new league mechanics. But I was also trying to get an understanding of what was going on with the build internally on a granular level, because I had a desire to increase my own knowledge of the game rather than having to lean fully on a build guide all the time. Eventually, with time, we were introduced to solo self-found mode. And I thought to myself, hey, maybe I know enough about Path of Exile in general, and now I know enough about this particular build that I might be able to give solo self-found a go and see how far I get. Straight away, the first thing I noticed that was whenever I ran into any issues with the build or in the campaign or I needed life or resistances, I struggled a bit. There were longer plateaus. The momentum that I had felt in trade wasn't there to the same extent, and I stalled out more often, and those stalls were much longer than in trade. But there was a huge sense of achievement and a sense of excitement and enjoyment, more importantly, when I found either an upgrade that was meaningful to the build in a general sense, or if a unique item that was crucial to the build dropped. Later down the line, when it came to league starting solo self-found more consistently, I found myself looking at build guides and asking, can this build work on just rare items and without some of the rarer unique items, even if it's just for a time? It didn't have to come online straight away, but I needed it to have a sense of the progress that it was going to have early on. The pace of play and the cadence in which I was enjoying the game moment to moment was being heavily influenced by the scarcity and the slower pace of SSF, and it was great. It was liberating, and it was a welcome change of pace and a wonderful environment to learn within. And that learning would become much, much deeper over time because it was being fueled out of necessity. I would need to learn how to craft certain items in certain ways. More importantly, though, I learned to be okay with the state of my character at any given moment. It became a personal knowledge rhythm to know how far I could push a build to be comfortably enjoying it as I waited for upgrades, rather than trying to push into content that the build wasn't ready for. Sometimes I would try just to kind of push the envelope out a bit, but generally I found it wasn't enjoyable to try content if the build wasn't ready for it. So I played spell totem builds almost exclusively when I first started streaming Path of Exile on Twitch, because again, it was the vehicle that I had learned the game with and I was most comfortable with. People were now starting to see the journey that I was on with this build. And for anyone who's familiar with these types of builds, there are certain unique items that are crucial to have spell totem builds work, most notably the KEKazarus and then the Soul Mantle body armor. And because there would be times where RNGesus would be paddling me and I would be on a progression plateau, KEKazarus would not drop, Soul Mantles would not drop. It was painful at times. At one point, I remember desperately trying to chance a Soul Mantle with every chance orb that I found. 2 community inside jokes / memes were birthed. We have the KEKazaru, any unique topaz ring that dropped, and it turned out to not be a KEKazaru ring, that became a KEKazaru ring. Brittany's tag team relay race a number of years back, team that we entered into that race with was called the KEKazarus. I'll throw up the splash art that we had for second meme, was in relation to the Soul Mantle, though I suppose more pertinently related to the Covenant. But that became the Troll Mantle, because again, whenever a unique base item dropped and it pinged on my loot filter, it wasn't a Soul Mantle, it was always the Troll Mantle. Very first unique I ever chanced in my entire time playing this game was the Covenant, not a Soul Mantle. I think sharing that journey in solo self-found with that particular build and the search for the items it required was an incredibly enjoyable time for both myself and the people watching. Having the community memes of the Troll Mantle and the KEKazaru stand out fondly now as memories for me all these years later. So when private leagues came out, I decided to throw down a challenge to my viewers. Come see how you fare in the Big Banter Challenge private league. You're going to make a spell totem build, you're going to get to level 90, you're going to find and equip 2 KEKazarus, and you're going to find, use, and equip a Soul Mantle. That was it. Whoever got to it first, they got a prize, and they got the bragging rights for getting the dub. It was a lot of fun, and shout out to Outstand Zero for the win on that. I promise you, you will get your div card, hopefully before May 2027. But that community challenge then opened my eyes to the potential for communal experience that you can get via private leagues. It's been very interesting to see the rise of interest in private leagues. You have Zizarin and Steel Mage doing Chat SF and their duo private leagues. Darth Microtransaction has also done large private leagues too. Baylor Mage as well. And a prime showcase of how fun or how challenging or how varied private leagues can be is Zizarin's Gauntlet. Every time a gauntlet runs, it's fantastic to see and hear about what occurs within it. Editor Bantics here from the future. I also want to throw in a huge shout out to Badger and all the work that they did with organizing Badger private leagues. The team element and theming around those private leagues is another prime example of the success and communal experience that can be achieved with private leagues. I organize and play in my own private league every league start as well. We started back in Ultimatum League in 2021, and generally we have about 50 to 100 players within it. All of us have the shared mindset about enjoyment of that communal experience of going on a journey with whatever your plan is for a build or whatever goals you have for the end game. That shared mindset allows us to have open trade. So instead of exchanging currency for items, we just give items to people. Everybody has a wish list on the Discord. If somebody finds a desired item, and assuming they're not going to need to use it for some plans of their own, they're encouraged to pass the item on to a person who's looking to overcome any progression plateaus that that item helps alleviate. So ultimately, our private league is helping lower the level of friction that might exist and also increasing the progression momentum. If you have any larger crafting projects or you've got a really off meta or obscure build, you'll still have to treat things like solo self-found early on. What I'm trying to highlight here is there are different ways via the league mode that you choose that can change how much progress friction you feel, how quickly or how slowly momentum can build for a character's progression, or how much communal or social engagement you have while you play the game. You have different ways to tailor your player experience and enjoyment with the game, and critically at the earlier stages of a league. I've found great enjoyment via group found and private leagues because it's become a communal social experience on top of what Path of Exile the game also provides. And what I've seen in the comments on the previous video and the broader discussion around this topic, there definitely seems to be kinship to be found playing with people of a similar mindset as yourself. For most of us, we already kind of do it depending on which streamers or YouTubers you choose to watch or not to watch. So that's been my approach to league selection to date and how they've all kind of affected my journey, my rhythm through Path of Exile. It's very much not about the moment-to-moment gameplay like the mechanics video I was discussing, and it's more on a macro level for the early stages of a character's progression. We'll see which game mode I inevitably end up picking for the next launch. I'm not actually sure if private leagues exist in Path of Exile 2 at the moment. Maybe they do. Food for thought for myself. And maybe, and I hope, that this video gives you a bit of food for thought as well, and you start asking yourself questions. How much friction do you want to feel in your game? How quickly or steadily do you want progress momentum towards your goals or your character to occur? How much yapping do you want to do with like-minded players? How much experimentation, optimization, learning, market domination are you trying for? And how much time do you have to play, or how long do you want to play for? A lot of these questions and more can be very helpful to figure out what type of experience you're looking for. Not just for this upcoming league, but also for the leagues afterwards. Maybe even for other games you might decide to play, and possibly even in your own life and how you choose to spend your time within it.